Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a crisis that many experts once warned about, but few believed would arrive this fast. Iran is now facing what can only be described as its ultimate water disaster, and at the center of this unfolding emergency stands Tehran, a city of millions that is being pushed toward evacuation. As water sources collapse, for decades Iran has struggled with water scarcity, but the current situation goes far beyond seasonal drought or temporary shortages. Rivers that once supported agriculture and urban life have dried into cracked riverbeds. Reservoirs are sitting at historic lows, and underground aquifers have been pumped far beyond their natural recovery limits. What we are witnessing now is the result of years of pressure finally reaching a breaking point. Tehran, home to more than 10 million people in its metropolitan area, was never designed to survive without a stable and abundant water supply. The city expanded rapidly, drawing water from distant dams, mountain snowmelt, and underground reserves. As climate patterns shifted and rainfall declined, these sources became increasingly unreliable, yet consumption continued to rise. One of the most alarming aspects of this crisis is how suddenly it has accelerated. Officials had long acknowledged the risk, but emergency measures were often delayed or softened due to political, economic, and social concerns. Now, water rationing has become stricter, pressure in pipelines has dropped, and entire neighborhoods are experiencing prolonged outages. The term evacuation is no longer hypothetical. Authorities have begun openly discussing the possibility that parts of Tehran may become uninhabitable if water supply systems fail completely. This is not because the city is being destroyed by war or earthquake, but because something as basic as water can no longer be guaranteed for daily life. To understand how severe this situation is, it helps to look at the roots of the problem. Climate change has played a major role, with rising temperatures, increasing evaporation, and reducing snowpack in the mountains that feed Iran's rivers. Rainfall has become more unpredictable, often arriving in short, destructive floods rather than steady replenishing showers. At the same time, decades of overuse have drained underground aquifers faster than they can naturally recharge. Farmers drilled deeper wells to maintain crops, cities expanded their pumping systems, and regulation was often weak or poorly enforced. As a result, land subsidence has become common, with parts of Tehran literally sinking as empty aquifers collapse. Agriculture, which consumes the majority of Iran's water, has also intensified the crisis. Traditional irrigation methods waste enormous amounts of water, yet changing these systems requires investment and structural reform that has been slow to materialize. Crops that demand high water usage continue to be grown in regions that can no longer support them. Urban demand adds another layer of stress. Tehran's population growth increased water consumption for homes, industries, and public services. Leaks in aging infrastructure waste significant amounts of water before it ever reaches consumers, making shortages even worse. As reservoirs shrink, the quality of remaining water also declines. Higher concentrations of pollutants, salinity, and sediment make treatment more difficult and expensive. In some areas, water that does reach households is unsafe or unsuitable for many uses, forcing people to rely on bottled supplies or improvised storage. The social impact of this disaster is already visible. Residents are adjusting daily routines around water availability, schools and businesses are disrupted, and tensions are rising in communities competing for limited resources. When basic needs are threatened, frustration quickly turns into anger and fear. For many families, the idea of leaving Tehran is becoming a serious consideration. Moving away from jobs, schools, and social networks is never easy, but when water becomes unreliable, survival takes priority. Smaller cities and rural areas, however, are often facing similar shortages, leaving few clear destinations. Economically, the consequences are enormous. Industries that depend on water, from manufacturing to energy production, face shutdowns or reduced capacity. This leads to job losses, reduced income, and further strain on an economy already under pressure from sanctions and inflation. The government's response has included emergency rationing, public awareness campaigns, and plans to transfer water from distant regions. However, large-scale water transfer projects are controversial and expensive, often creating new environmental and political problems while offering only temporary relief. Desalination has been proposed as a solution, especially for coastal regions, but Tehran's inland location makes this option complex and costly. Transporting desalinated water over long distances requires massive infrastructure and energy, raising questions about feasibility. International experts warn that Tehran's situation is not unique, but it is among the most severe examples of how urban centers can be pushed to the edge by water mismanagement and climate stress. Similar patterns are emerging in other parts of the Middle East and beyond. What makes Tehran particularly vulnerable is the combination of scale and timing. Millions of people depend on systems that were built for a different climate and a smaller population. When those systems fail, the impact is immediate and widespread. Environmental damage adds another layer to the crisis. Wetlands that once acted as natural buffers have dried up, increasing dust storms and reducing biodiversity. These changes further degrade living conditions and public health, making the city less resilient. Public trust is also at risk. When authorities cannot ensure basic services, confidence in governance weakens. Transparency and clear communication become crucial, yet mixed messages and delayed action can deepen uncertainty and panic. Some experts argue that the evacuation discussion itself reflects how close the situation is to becoming uncontrollable. Evacuating a city the size of Tehran would be an unprecedented logistical challenge, affecting transportation, housing, employment, and social stability across the country. Long-term solutions require fundamental changes. Water pricing reforms could reduce waste, but they are politically sensitive. Modernizing agriculture, repairing infrastructure, and enforcing groundwater regulations take time and consistent commitment. Education and public participation are equally important. Encouraging conservation at the household level can help, but it cannot solve a crisis of this magnitude on its own. Systemic change is essential. The crisis also raises regional concerns. Shared water resources and cross-border rivers mean that Iran's water problems can affect neighboring countries, increasing the risk of diplomatic tensions in an already fragile region. From a human perspective, the story is deeply personal. Behind every statistic are families struggling to adapt, children growing up with uncertainty, and elderly residents facing health risks due to poor water quality and heat. The psychological toll should not be underestimated. Living with constant shortages creates stress and anxiety, affecting mental health and social cohesion. Communities that once thrived can quickly feel unstable when resources disappear. Looking ahead, experts warn that without decisive action, Tehran's water disaster could become a model for what other megacities might face in the coming decades. Climate change is accelerating, and many urban centers rely on fragile water systems. Yet, there is still a narrow window for change. Investments in sustainable water management, climate adaptation, and regional cooperation could slow the decline. The challenge is whether political will and public support can align quickly enough. Technology offers some hope. Smart water monitoring, recycling wastewater, and improving efficiency can stretch existing supplies. However, technology must be paired with policy reform to be effective. Ultimately, the situation in Tehran is a reminder that water is not an infinite resource. When it is taken for granted, the consequences can be catastrophic. Cities are only as strong as the systems that sustain life within them. As Iran faces this ultimate water disaster, the world is watching closely. The lessons learned here may shape how other nations prepare for and respond to similar threats. Whether Tehran can avoid mass evacuation remains uncertain, but the urgency of the moment is undeniable. This crisis is not just about Iran. It is a warning to every rapidly growing city in a warming world. Water security is becoming one of the defining challenges of our time, and how we respond now will determine the future of millions. The coming months and years will reveal whether Tehran can adapt, recover, or retreat. What is clear is that the era of ignoring water limits is over, and the cost of delay has never been higher.